Welcome. Thank you for those that are joining us, that are hopping on this morning to Rooted in Practice. This is where the work begins within and it's lived before it's offered. It's a practitioner first summit focused on how we actually live the work that we offer, the pillars of a holistic lifestyle: rest, nutrition, hydration, movement, spirituality, self-care. There's also a few nuanced conversations happening and internal structural columns, if you will, within those systems that we're going to be speaking on. And today I'm going to be inviting in Carollanne. She's our guest speaker, and I'll introduce her in just a moment, but she's going to look at this holistic lifestyle through an Ayurvedic lens. But the summit over the last 2 days isn't about learning more to give. It's really about building a sustainable, aligned practice from the inside out for us as practitioners so we can continue to fill others' cups. We're filling our own in order to pour into others. So if you're new to my community, hi, I'm Jaime. I am the founder of the Holistic Spa Alliance. I am an accredited educator and a practitioner myself in the treatment room, both in massage and aesthetics. Today, and yesterday, I have been acting as a facilitator to some really great conversations. And if you've enjoyed the conversations happening throughout the summit, the HSA, the Holistic Spa Alliance, was created to support wellness practitioners beyond this event as well. The HSA is a place where we can learn, grow, connect, build more sustainable careers. And we have a growing ecosystem to do that. We have live events. We have small community or personal community conversations via Zoom. We have ongoing memberships. We do education both online and hands-on in person. So if any of this interests you, we'd love to have you join our community. Go to holisticspaalliance.com. Without any further ado, I would love to introduce our guest speaker. So Carollanne is going to be talking with us about daily rhythm and balance. Her talk today is going to be the 4 pillars of health, an Ayurvedic inspired path. Carollanne, when you are ready to come on live, I would love to have you, and I'll introduce you a little further here. Good morning. Thank you so
Good
much for
morning.
joining.
Yeah.
Carollanne is an LMT, a licensed massage therapist, an Ayurvedic rejuvenation therapist, and an esthetician. And she's a founder and formulist at Solavedi Organics, which, little side note here, a personal side note, is I use her products as a massage therapist and as an esthetician. My clients love your products. I love your
Mhm.
products. They're so efficacious. Their scent profile is so complex in a plant medicinal way that is not harsh to the senses. I don't know how else to say that. I hope that comes across as a major
Oh,
compliment
it does.
because I am not into high scent profiles. And I do love a plant medicine scent, but sometimes that doesn't cross well between us and the client. It depends. But
Yeah.
so you bridge this beautifully. And I don't mean to take us off course, but I just wanted to add that little
Well,
beautiful thank you basically to the products that you produce for us as well. But
I feel so appreciated in this moment. Thank you. And God, loving your introduction. I'm all fired up, and I feel like I need to thank you for creating the Holistic Spa Alliance before we go forward. This is very meaningful and very needed. So thank you, what you're doing. And
thank you.
hello out there to everybody.
Yes.
I'm happy to be here. And boy, yeah, I'm eager. I'm eager to be a part of the group here.
Well,
So,
good, because we are eager to hear from you. And yes, thank you to everybody who's joining, has joined, or will be watching this on replay. Let me start before we get into the actual education, the bulk of who you are or what we're going to talk about. I want to know who you are a little bit more. So I gave, a formal introduction, but tell us who Carollanne is and share a little bit about your own journey that originally pulled you towards this work.
I'd love to. First, I want to start at the end and say that I'm coming up on 40 years in practice, and this could not be more
Mind blowing.
apropos to 40 years of dedicated, passionate, vital practice that I still perform and offer. And I just want to start at the end. This has a happy ending because it's all about what you're talking about. How do I sustain the spark within? And so it began. Dark and stormy night. It began very long ago, and I was not at all in the healing space. I was a textile designer, and I was working at the Met in New York doing costume restoration. And I thought that was going to be my life. And I had a horse. I was thrown from my horse. I broke my back. I was paralyzed from the waist down. And I went to some neurosurgeons who offered me what I see, and I love Western medicine. It's so appropriate in many cases, and it can't be beat. But they sometimes it's the medicine of impossibility. And at that time, I was told that I was probably never walk again. And there was something in me that just said, I don't think that's really true. I feel like I know something, and I didn't know what I knew other than I have a strong will. And my mother, I'm grateful to say, so first of all, I'm old enough to say I'm a total hippie. And we grew up in natural medicine and naturopaths. And she said, I think you should go see a yoga doctor. We didn't have the word Ayurveda then, but it was yoga doctor. And the yoga doctor I went to, short version, showed me a holistic path that completely turned my life around. It included diet and herbs and visualization and breath work and meditation. He put me on bolsters. We now call that positional release in yoga. And most of it was just the power of, I hate to say it, positive thinking, but working with the energy in the body. And there were other things that were going on medically for me that cleared up simultaneous to that. So I was completely taken off the textile design path. And I set out onto a course of wanting to learn everything that I could, having to do with
Imagine.
healing.
Hmm.
So the next thing I did was I went to India and I had a panchakarma. For those of you that I want to say, my role in the Ayurvedic and Western world, I have always seen it as a translator because Ayurveda need not be exotic or out of reach for the Westerner or for the sincere person who's looking for healing. And I believe that it applies everywhere, not just in India. So I always love to translate the words. But Panchakarma is the rejuvenation medicine of Ayurveda. And I went for an extended stay because I felt like that's what I needed. And while I was there, I said, can I study here? Can I learn from you? And it was at the Kerala clinic. And at that time, they didn't have a formal education program, but they took me on as an apprentice. And I wanted to drop that into this is that I have very little formal education, and yet I am an educator. I take this very sincerely, and I've done a lot of apprenticeships and mentorships. And that's why I love what you're doing is you're providing a container for all of us in this community to cross-pollinate and support one another. So hope that answers the question without going on too many side tangents of
No,
it,
it
it was all
absolutely
personal.
does. Yeah, thank you. And I just want to note on the one of the last things that you said that you don't have formal education. I firmly believe that education that is passed down, whether it be generationally, whether it be from your extended stay and visit to learn and study under these masters of what they're doing, is the same as going to university, in my opinion, and getting the piece of paper that goes with it. We're learning from somebody
Mhm.
somehow, and it's passed down. And that's how it was done until up until a certain time. So I feel like the wisdom that you bring forward, even if it's not the quote unquote from university, is still of its highest quality. At a loss for my words here. I hope I'm
No,
making
you're very
sense with
clear
this.
and
But
affirming. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I don't want you to, and I don't think you were discrediting it,
No,
at
but
all. But
you recognize that validation is really important. And I have sometimes felt inadequate when somebody who's gone to a whole school asked me what school I went to. And I'm like, well, do you have an hour? I could sit down and tell you all the
absolutely.
times.
Yeah, and that's a society-driven thing. Like, where did you go to
Yeah,
school? What is your education in? For me to say, and I do plug that in. I'm an accredited educator on some things, not all of the things, though, right? But you're right. We
right.
do want that affirmation little piece in there.
Yeah.
For societal norm. But nonetheless, I know firsthand that your wisdom is whole and beautiful. And I've absorbed as much as I've been able to. And you were at the top of my list to speak to because I know I've mentioned to you personally, and I've said it probably in some of my little thousands of video spiels that have gone out. But Ayurvedic has been so intriguing to me, but I've kept it at arm's length because it's been intimidating to me.
Mm.
And I don't think I was I'm aware now that I wasn't just open to diving into it and allowing it to be and take it in small doses so that it wasn't so overwhelming. So I'm really excited for you to have this conversation with us and start to plant seeds so that maybe anybody else like myself, but it's for myself, frankly, it's well to, gain information and go down this path because
Right.
from our personal conversations, I've noticed that my alignment and your alignment are so close, but I just didn't follow the quote unquote Ayurvedic path. So I'm intrigued even more so. But tell us the four pillars of health and Ayurvedic Inspire Path. What does this title, what does this talk today mean? And then we'll jump
Yeah.
into the questions.
So the four pillars of health are simplified, which I hope doesn't make it too simplified, but very, very concise. We think of our life as a table with four legs, and that without the four pillars or legs being of equal value, that table will not function. So it's really about how to function, how to sustain, how to how to live in the world, and not just focus on a table that has one leg. Like that's some of the things that I see in Western healing and medicine is the fragmentation or the specialization that is great. Someone can drill really deeply into diet and nutrition and exclude meditation, for instance. So I'm going to introduce the four pillars. And I will say that this is not the only interpretation or definition of the four pillars of health. If you speak to a million Ayurvedic practitioners, you'll have a million different perspectives. But the one that I work with is the physical pillar being diet and exercise. Then there's a pillar that has to do with rest and restoration and, finding balance, which is always very challenging.
Mhm.
Then there's actually a behavioral or ethical or social pillar that really plays into our lives a lot more than we think. And there's another pillar that has to do with joy and pleasure. And I'll tell you one of the reasons that I was drawn, besides having an injury and going to the yoga doctor, was that the intake in a yoga doctor's office was so different than it was in a medical practice. He actually asked me, was I gazing upon enough beauty? And was I, what do I do for joy? And I was like, I
Love
love this.
this.
I love this.
Yes.
It's, way ahead of his time. I mean, this was back in the late 70s. I'm sure it wasn't ahead of his time, but ahead of our time in America. Now we're doing things like this and we're beginning to catch on that we have to have passion. We have to have a balance. So that's what the four pillars are. And then I would say overall is knowing yourself. So one of the greatest gifts a person can gain and give to her or himself is finding out who you are. So that saying, to thine own self be true, applies. And what I mean by that is in an Ayurvedic viewpoint and through that lens, it would be What is your metabolic type? What is your engine run on? And I will leave out the words of dosha and all of the Sanskrit words and just use the words metabolism, because it's very important to know whether you're a person who builds tissue and holds on and accumulates toxicity, sluggishness, and inertia, or if you tend to be catabolic, which means that you require replenishment and a lot more nourishment on intervals, like grazing through the day, and that you're going to process things very quickly. And I understand that the other speakers that you have in the summit are talking about the nervous system and the lymphatic system, and there it is.
Mhm.
Ayurveda is really focused on balancing those two. So what perfect way to introduce it. So knowing yourself and then looking at and visiting and incorporating all of those four pillars without using your intellect too much, because I think that that's where we get stuck sometimes, is overthinking. So my aim is to make this really practical and simple.
Thank you. And it's already started that way. You've already started to connect some dots. I've never looked at the doshas as a metabolic
Oh,
aspect. So, do you think it's metabolic? Is metabolically, do you think it's due to their metabolic type that they feel off? Even when they love the work that they do, I'm talking like burnout and, that type of thing? Or do you think it's something different, one of the legs, one of those four pillars, or is it a combination? Why do you
it's
think many practitioners feel off, even though they're in a field that they absolutely love?
in order to answer that question, I would have to say that it's going to change throughout a person's practice and life. For me, when I was off in the very beginning as a new practitioner, was because I overextended myself and I had learned 80 different techniques and wanted to do all 80 in 1 hour. So I was trying to be a hero and I was trying to fix people. And that can be summed up in I cannot pour from an empty cup. So I ended up with depletion. Also, there was, in my own personal life, I was a single mom and I was in a financial stress. So I never said no to any invitation to have an appointment. I would overbook. So beginning of a person's practice, we make those mistakes and they're intended to teach us. I think it's all a classroom. And then the self-correction, course correction will step in. So middle life of a practitioner, as I said, I'm at the end. I'm kind of semi-retired, but I'll never stop. And then I learned about wise management of time. What a concept. I had a mentor who said, Carollanne, we all only have 24 hours in a day. So you're not unique, because I used to feel like I had it harder than everyone else, and you talk to all the clients, everyone has the same thing. How are we going to manage a day? So that's what I would love to talk about. What does a day look like that's well managed? And towards the end, where I'm at now, I don't feel like it's even an issue of feeling off. So I want to put that out there again. This is a life path that can be fulfilling and sustaining. And I hope it is. I hope it is.
We touched upon that a little bit with Emily, who speaks on conscious growth and how it's a constant journey of ebbing and flowing. And you'll have seasons of a lot of balance, and then you'll have seasons where you're slightly out of balance or even more
Wow.
out of balance. And it's how you rise and fall with the flow that is happening. Some people call it the roller coaster of life because there are ups and there are downs,
Yeah.
and being able to just know how to maintain through them. But we heard a little bit when you introduced yourself more on how the path became personal to you. But when did you realize the balance isn't something we achieve once, kind of what you're talking about here, but something we have to actively maintain? Was there a moment that you did notice that I've reached balance, but then I've noticed I've gone back down? Like, was that a moment that was an aha for you that helped you further in this Ayurvedic path as you were learning?
So that's a good question. So I feel like I always seem to learn from being in a problem. When I realize I'm depleted, I would then
Mhm.
sit and slow down and reflect before now I think I'm smarter and I plan better and accommodate change better. But no, I think that it became very personal when I added, and this is not really part of the practice conversation, but it maybe should be, is when I added a yoga practice to my personal life. And I learned about the fact that all we have is the present moment and to breathe. And wow, that changed everything for me when I realized that I was living in the future. I was always living in the future and I was not really fully present. So was it aha moment? Not really. It was just a very slow upward rising, line of better energy, more practice. So I will say, I just said, I don't know that this is really part of our discussion, and maybe it should be. When I was in one of my apprenticeships, the Ayurvedic teacher said, you cannot do massage therapy without a yoga practice. And I think what he meant was we must learn to regulate our own energy. If we're going to be able to be present fully 100% in joy with our clients. So whether it's yoga, Pilates, weight training, that's one of the pillars, is your exercise and how diet and exercise. How do I regulate my energy? Sometimes it's subtle and I'll take a restorative practice, and other times it's go dancing. So, we need to really, for me, I learned a lot through the yoga and I apply that into the work I do.
This is interesting too, because it's solidifying what this talk is about, obviously. And I love how each talk has kind of crossed in and weaved throughout. But something you just said, like there are moments that I need more of a restorative or a rest. And then there are times that I know that my body needs to move or dance or express itself. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes when you think of balance, if I'm going to make an analogy and I have the five, or in your case, the four cups that we need to balance, and you put water in each one, the water, if you put a pinhole in the bottom, that doesn't drain out all at the same level. And then I have to go back and put the same amount into rest and the same amount into happiness and
Nice.
the same amount. You need to slow down enough and be reflective or in the moment enough to understand which cup does need to be filled.
Hmm.
And um, I'm going to come back to that a little bit more in a moment, but let me turn this a little bit more personal to you. What do you notice in yourself when you're out of rhythm or not supporting your body versus when you are? You've touched upon a few things, but even going further into energy, clarity, mood, physical body, presence with others, like tell us all the embodiment changes or differences that you notice when you're ebbing and flowing with a good rhythm.
Definitely. Okay, so I have a kind of weird sense of humor. When I'm not feeling very balanced, when I'm depleted and I look at my calendar, I wish somebody would cancel. And then they do, and I'm happy. And that's a true confession that it feels like the universe works with me and
Have
hears
never
me.
considered that. I have been there before, and I'm like, I haven't slowed down long enough to realize that's the pattern reflecting back to me. I have had days where I'm like, gosh, I wish I could just stay in bed. I hope
Right. I wish
somebody,
I didn't say yes to this. And then you'll get an email and the person will say, I'm overbooked. I'm like, that's okay. I understand. And I'm like, oh, exhale. So that's one sign that is definitely tangible. I don't, I have to kind of reach back because I'm not in a place where I do a lot of that right now, but I think it just has to do with the amount of energy and being being looking forward to the work. Like I wake up, I love my clients. I'm sure everyone I'm speaking to here, you love your clients. I've been told, and this comes not through Ayurveda, but this is me translating. You have to give to get. And so I live in a circle of giving and receiving. And so I look forward to the client work because even though sometimes I might feel blah after a session, I feel bright. So there's giving to getting. And then I have to balance that with, like you said, the cups. I cannot overgive, and I tend to be an overgiver. And so there is going to always be calibration, that calibration of, okay, so what's the sweet spot? And find the sweet spot for wherever your life is at that moment, whatever else you have going on and responsibilities. And I talked about the wise management of time earlier and had to do with, I changed from when people called and wanted appointments well, first of all, I want to say when I started, I had one of those daily planners on paper that would break the day down in 15-minute
Oh,
increments.
yes.
So I thought that would be good. I'll fill every block because I went to doctor's offices and I saw that's what they do. So I
Mhm.
want to be like them. I want to be fully booked. And I would only leave maybe 10 minutes between appointments. Don't do that. So
There.
yeah, wise management of time. Then I got into cluster booking. So just do this at this time, answer emails at this time, don't try to do everything all at once. I would say that if that works, that's good, but make adjustments. I make adjustments to how much time and space do I want to leave unscheduled. There's never too much of that. So working it out, and that's all I can say is I don't have the final answer other than that's the dance right there.
No, that definitely is an answer. And we talked about this as an example in movement and to prompt yourself to move, even if you don't feel like it right now. So if you're going in at an energy level of 2, if you can prompt yourself, this whole giving to receive, to just go on that walk, not intensive because that's not where your body's at today, but you're going to go from that energy level of 2 and it's going to be raised. How high is,
Uh-huh.
well, sky's the limit, but that giving to get, I didn't feel like moving, but I pushed myself, gently urged myself, nudged myself to walk, and my energy level came up. I gave to give so I can understand that circular aspect. I I'm curious, you speak a lot about working with the body instead of against it. These Ayurvedic 4 pillars. What does it actually look like in everyday life for you? So what does it mean for you, Carollanne, to live within, I'm going to summarize it, but in within these 4 pillars?
Well, I'm going to answer that, but first I want to respond to what you said about raising the 2 energy level by moving a muscle and getting out and pushing forward a little bit. That in Ayurveda would be about that very anabolic, metabolic, or kapha energy, which is kind of like heavy. And that's how I work with the body, is to sometimes give my body what it doesn't think it wants. Okay, so back to what does a day look like? And my day is sacred. This is really non-negotiable. My morning is mine. And my morning, the world does not come in the morning. And the morning starts with, first of all, I'm so blessed. I live in Maine in a beautiful rural setting that is just a paradise. I love it. So I have the visual beauty, that Vidya asked me, am I gazing on enough beauty? I am. And even when it's raining and gross, it's beautiful. So I start the day, and I mean hours. I get up very early, sunrise, and I start the day in silence, meditation, outside, because I have animals. But even if I didn't, I would just go outside and check out the weather outside so that I connect with nature. So nature's a huge piece of my morning. I would call it like spirituality. It's not maybe religion, but nature is my religion. So
Mhm.
I do that. I have a partner who is also very spiritual, and his spiritual practice is he makes me espresso and serves
I
me every
love
morning. And
this.
I feel like a complete goddess. And then we have a spiritual, we pick books and we kind of pick a reading and we will read it to each other and start there. So that's really a unique and personal thing. I don't think that everyone would
Beautiful.
would resonate with that, but I feel like I wanted to, give some credit to how important that is in my life is relationship, but I don't even let that in before I've had my time, my quiet time. Then, according to Ayurveda, I would start the what we call dinacharya. And dinacharya in English is your daily practices. And the daily practices, we make a joke, in Ayurveda, you can't have a job because the first half of the day gets you ready for the second half of the day. So I modify that, but it usually involves a little bit of body massage with oil, gentle stretching or yoga, a warm bath afterwards to remove the oil. And those were, we think of it as the morning toilette. So, we do all of these things. It's self-care first, basically. The middle part of the day is, if I were not working, I would eat because Dinacharya says that the best time to eat during the day is from 10 to 2 when the sun is the highest in the sky. Your metabolism is the strongest, and everything you eat will be assimilated and digested properly, and you will not gain weight. So the bigger meal is in the middle of the day, biggest meal in the middle of the day. Um, on a weight note, I will say that when I was in Newport, we had some sumo wrestlers, and somehow I got to visit with them. And I asked that question that they hear all the time: How do you get so fat? And they said, We eat our meals after 8 p.m. You know, eating heavy at night is the surest way to accumulate fat. So, anyway, middle of the day, eating large. How do I work with clients within that framework? I will take one client either at 10 or 11 and then, large meal or the other side of it, like at 1:30. So I'm not I'm not busy, but I would say that the most people I see in a day are two because each session is 2 hours. So that's what I'm doing these days. And then at the end of the day, I do responding and corresponding and phone calls, emails. I do that in the morning too. So basically, that's a day. I know I cut out some things, but I go to bed early. That's another thing. So the early to bed, early to rise applies.
Okay, where do I start? I am like vigorously taking mental notes, wishing I had a notepad. I see parallels in my life to, again, why I'm so intrigued with the Ayurvedic aspects here. So I have been practicing for 22 years. I'm going to be 45 next week, actually. Yay, me.
Happy
I'm at
birthday.
a point where I'm celebrating that. But my point in saying that is we live life forward, but we can understand it backwards. And in my
Mm,
early part of my career, I was the same. I was go, go, go. I was watching what does everybody else do? I happened to be in a salon that did the same every 15 minutes. It was full. When you
mhm.
start, I came from scarcity and I will take anybody at any time and overfill and overcommit because we're
Yep.
trying to be financially, gain financially and pay our bills. And it's truly been in the last couple of years on my own journey of healing and really trying to become balanced within this holistic lifestyle that I've learned that I can't look to emulate what somebody else is doing for them. But as you were saying, for you, it works to have that quiet time in the morning. You have your spiritual time, and then you introduce your relationship time. And that works for you. And the parallel that I see it is I'm finally realizing, okay, I don't need to get my kids up and out the door to school and then immediately jump into the treatment room. I do have the flexibility if I want to purpose my life to
Mm.
start my day at this time later so that I can slow down and have, because I do need me time as well. I have little bodies that don't allow me to not talk to anybody, but I will be honest with you, I would prefer not to talk to a soul. I I bring up a smile and a I love you and a good morning to my children, but there is not a lot of conversations. Disclaimer, I'm a loving mom, but I need that like me time before I get into the world. And for so long, I went from rushing to get the kids off to school to then rushing to get to the treatment room to get it setting and then rushing to get on into the treatment itself and then on to the next. And I now put a good hour in between because that's what works for me. And it is going to be different for everybody. And I think that's in my mind at least an aha moment that I hope a lot of people get, like how to structure the day for you, what works for you. I have friends that like to structure a 4 a.m. movement, workout, run. That is not me. It will never be me. But
Me
at
neither.
between 9 and 10, I will walk. I will go out into my backyard. I have a beautiful space there. I'll walk my dirt road. Um, and it is about figuring out what works for you, not what is going to work for everybody. I would assume that's one of the foundational pillars of Ayurvedic is for it to be personalized, not a steadfast pillar, but I'm sure that's part of the concept of
It,
Ayurvedic is
it ties
personalization.
into to thine own self be true. And part of
Design
this
yourself.
conversation that I want to throw out there is finding out whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. And because that tells you what charges your batteries. And I now accept I'm an introvert. It doesn't mean I'm an isolator or antisocial. There was a lot of judgment for a long time on people like me that wanted to be alone or needed a lot of me time. But being in crowds and overdoing and over socializing is really draining for this battery. So that has to do with nervous system. So, when we look at it from, it is Ayurvedic and it is also now part of our vernacular, which I love. I love the progress that we're making and coming together.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, how do you see things like we've been talking about rest, nourishment, your daily rhythms, impacting not just the body, but how we show up to work? I mean, I can sit here and connect the dots, but I do want you to elaborate that. The practice that you're holding, how does it show up for you in your work that has brought you here 40 years later? Because that is incredible. We hear far too often that in the spa world, the career dies out, or there's burnout, or there's injury happening before the 10-year
Mm,
mark.
yes. Well, I'm so glad I never went to formal training because I'm hearing from other therapists that they're getting educated in the negative of how to not burn out and how to take shortcuts just to preserve their thumbs or whatever. I am still using my hands only. I don't use elbows. I don't use tools. Um, I don't mean to dog on those that do, but I really feel that managing your own life will show up in the practice in a different way. So here's how I would say that it's really practical. One way I could unpack this bag is I don't rush. I don't rush. I show up. I understand that my client, to them, this hour or 2 hours is precious. They're just as busy as I am, and they created time to be with me. And I don't want to ignore that or devalue that. And I want to be there for them 100%. One of my other early mentors had told me, don't be so tired that you're feeding off of your client's energy. You need to uplift them, even if you're faking it, just you're there for them. And if you're not, you need to take some time off.
Mhm.
And so one of the things I do is allow people the grace of being 10 minutes early or late. I work in a rural setting and it takes a long time. And sometimes I have older people that are anxious and nothing to do, and they're going to show up early. I don't get mad at that. I used to because I was so tightly scheduled. With space, I can give grace. Then the thing that's important to me about that is I want a relationship and connection with my clients. I am not working on a cruise ship where it's transient population. That brings me to another point that I would like to touch on is when we know ourselves, we know our lane. I know I'm not a sports massage therapist. I don't try to be. I know how to do manual orthopedic work and really deep tissue work. And I can bring that into the Ayurvedic energy treatments and I can combine them. But I am not going to try and do something that's not in my heart. What's in my heart is going to be in my hands. And what's in my hands is coming from my own experience. I used to laugh and say, my body is my laboratory. So, I had a broken back. So I specialized in bad backs for a long time. And then I would get all these clients with knees. And I was like, darn, I haven't had any knee problems. And then, of course, I got a knee problem. I was like, okay, great, I can help you. And it is kind of silly sounding, but whatever I've experienced, and I think this is true for all of you, if you've had a healing journey, you're on the hero's journey. It's the wounded healer is someone who can hold space and be a container for a shared journey with your client. And that to me is what's priceless. And when we lose that, even if I don't have a knee problem or can't relate to someone's elbow problem, I can if I try, if I want to. And so I'll finish with this. When I work with someone, I love them. We may not agree politically. We may not agree socially. We may not have the same. Of course, everyone's going to have different opinions, but in that time that they're on my table, it's just love and respect. And that's what I would say keeps it fresh because I have no business judging people. And so that's one of the things that I think that can really shrink the channels. Ayurveda talks about there being channels of energy and prana. I want to keep my prana flowing. I don't need to make it get small by having a small mind. So that's it. I'm going to stop now. But
I love that you said that. And again, I said I've said this a few times. I parallels so much to all that you're saying. And the Holistic Spa Alliance, that is really one of its core foundations. If I'm going to steal your word, it's love, right? There's no space for differences of political views. I mean that in the way of it is okay if we're different in our
yeah,
opinions. It is
yeah.
also okay if we believe things as simple as holistically observing differently, right? So we are open and exclusive to inclusive of everybody. And we are only here to support as a community. And as you said, one on one in the treatment room, it just comes down to love, again, how you were saying. And I love that you brought that up. So beautiful.
Can I just give you one little example from my practice
Yes.
of where I was challenged in this? So I lived in Newport, I practiced in New York City, and I had a bunch of politicians and bigwigs as clients, and they would sit there on the massage table with the telephone and the New York Times while I was working on them. And I had a choice. I could either, I'm going to do this and love them, or I'm just not going to have them as clients. And, I ended up not having them as clients because I felt like it wasn't a balance. And I do respect
Sure.
myself enough because it was like, you can't be that important that you can't, if this, so I respect the person who carves out the time and makes it as special as it can be.
And I think this goes back to also when you know who you are
Yeah,
and what you're trying to attract as well. Whether it be you're not wanting to attract the person with the cell phone and the New York Times in one hand, or you're not wanting to attract the deep tissue client, right? Because you know who
right.
you are and what you want to put out
Exactly.
there.
Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely. We're certainly not creating spaces either. And I don't think you were saying this, where you're going to be either brigaded with, a political conversation that you don't align with, right? So my philosophy in my treatment room is I'm just choosing politics, well, because it's a hot topic, but not
Yeah.
because I want to go into it. But in my treatment room, we're not allowed to talk about it. Whether we
Right,
agree or disagree, this is not what we talk about here. It's about you and your support right now. And those that, I mean, or I just think people respect that and they're looking for that. They also want to break from that so they can
right.
become self-aware of
Yeah,
themselves in that moment for healing, for nervous
right.
system regulation, for the treatment itself. Um,
Totally.
if somebody listening feels completely out of rhythm or disconnected from their body, where do they begin? Where do us newbies begin?
To be very practical, I would say start tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, try to take a half an hour to yourself and see how it feels. And that's as simple as I think I can make it. Where to begin would be after that, look at your time meaning how you're scheduling and what you're doing with your time. And it's not to say, because I don't like it when people have ever said to me, you need to slow down, because I'm like, I'm on fire and I don't want to be told to slow down. I'm going to be ambitious and rocket ships my whole life. But I do need to use the time wisely. So if this is a seed, I'd like to drop it into their garden and say, look at how you're spending your time and start by in the morning just listening into your own energy, reflection. That's it. That's all I can say because, I'm not a nutrition specialist. But when you were talking about having 5 cups and having to know which one to fill, the other part of that conversation is knowing what to fill it with.
Mhm.
So, it's not always water, although I love the eat your water and I love hydration. And it's very big in Ayurveda. We call it Jalandhara. It's the coolant that our brain and cells need. It's also a solvent for toxins. And so drinking water may be as simple as having more hydration. In Ayurveda, the suggestion is not to guzzle ice cold water, but rather to carry a thermos or canister or sip warm or body temperature water throughout the day. Treat yourself like an orchid. So it's a little drip. And that works very, very well. So that's a therapy. And I want to say that within scope of practice, because there are things about being in an Ayurvedic path as well as an LMT and an esthetician. We all have different scopes, but none of them, without a license to prescribe, allow us, or me, and I want to say this, to prescribe or even suggest herbal supplements or any kind of dietary changes. So what I do with I would say for you, the practitioner, that you can share with your people is something as simple as lifestyle changes rather than, unless you're trained as a nutritionist, stick with how you can manage your time and what you choose. As far as food goes, I would just always fall back on eat what's in season, adjust seasonally. That's pretty safe. That's within scope. And just try to develop more of an inner or interior world, because whatever I like to say, I live from the inside out, not the outside in. And so living from the inside out means that everything on the outside is going to change. And like you said, there are cycles and rhythms and waves that hit us a lot. How I deal with that is going to determine how my life is and how my practice for my clients is. And I can rest assured that if I'm getting hit with those waves, so are they. So it can be a point of connection. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And as a newbie, where I started was exactly what you said. I finally slowed down to look at my schedule, and the schedule being a very physical thing for me as a practitioner. So whether you
Right.
use something digital or you have that old paper book that have the 15-minute blocks. And I started to purpose that time. Again, that space between sending the kids off to school to when I have to go into work. And I put it into my physical schedule.
Right.
And it took me a little bit before I could get there. As somebody who's as far into my career, I have forever clients. And so I had to slowly adjust them, but I purposed it. And each week I got closer to that purpose. And after that became normal to me, then I was able to layer in the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, those proverbial cups of water, as an analogy, are going to be the different pillars. So, what
Mhm.
I've been bringing to the table is one cup is movement, the next cup is hydration. Then you have nutrition, self care, spirituality, and possibly a few more cups. I want you, if you
Yeah.
don't mind, just to remind me what those four proverbial table legs are again
Yes.
in Ayurvedic.
Okay, so diet, the one is physical, diet and exercise.
Yep.
Another is rest. And rest incorporates, I believe, non-doing and meditation and listening rather than speaking. One that I haven't touched on is the ethical or the conduct, behavioral. And then the last one is spirit. It has to do with pleasure, joy, and inspiration.
And before you get into that ethical social one, I am hoping that each talk gives us a little insight on how to bridge these conversations appropriately without going beyond our scope of practice, because that's been a very important question that's layered
Yeah,
in here as well. I don't think I'm
I
going to
take
get
that
to it
seriously too.
specifically, yeah, very much so. I'm not going to get to that today. We're getting so close to the end of our time. Touch upon the ethical aspect briefly, and then I have one more
Yeah.
question in the next 7 minutes.
Okay, so this is going to be very brief. I want to first say ethical, in my view, is not moral and judgmental. It
Mhm.
has to do with the word service and being viewing my practice not as a job, but as a service. So providing service is different than just going to work. And, that's pretty much all I will say. Behavioral conduct within that is that I want to always feel that I have something, I can serve this person and their highest good. And the example I will give is in practice, like I gave the example of the politicians reading the New York Times and being on their phone. The kind of practice that requires me to perform is A, performative, and B, something that doesn't engage them to change anything about their life. So that they'll show up week after week and I'll be a slave or a servant to them. And that's not service. I'm not helping them
It's an
in that.
interesting perspective on what's actually happening there.
Right. Well, it is interesting because, again, the training I had was you can do that kind of work, but it will burn
Mhm.
you out. What you really want to do is work with your client and not judge them or push them, but see where they can have results and move the needle. Maybe they will change a behavior. Maybe you can show them a movement or something that will help them understand why their shoulder is doing what it's doing. That's who I want to work with. And that's what I say is ethical for me is don't just take people's money and, you know, do what they want if they're gonna, if that's, I mean, well, it's judgmental on me to say that, but I would say for me, it's better service if I'm working with someone who wants to work with what I have to offer.
I understand what you're saying, because there is that fine line of we can be different. And as long as we can come together with the same understanding and mutual respect, then we can work together. But when it doesn't align, whether it be political and they can't drop it to come into your door,
Oh, right. Yeah.
or the person that has the cell phone and the paper that won't stop to understand what their healing journey needs to be with you in order to make progress, right? So there's multiple ways to look at this. We still need to find and understand what that ethical line is for us to honor ourselves um, ethically move forward with a
Another
sustainable
teacher that I had
practice.
was once said that working with the wrong clients is like working with your hands tied behind your back. So I'm wasting my own time and energy if I'm working with someone who's really shut down. And again, that is not something that I find very frequently any longer, which is good, is that the people that do come for services, especially to me, they're looking to explore. And I love that curiosity.
I think that's when you really know who you are. Emily
Yeah.
touched upon this in conscious growth and quality leadership specifically, which is you have to know who you are. You have to identify who you are authentically to lead in her example, but it blends beautifully into what you're saying. You have to know who you are authentically in order to attract that client. And now that is who comes to you. And rarely, I would imagine, is somebody that is not aligned with you looking to work with you. And that's the beautiful part of what we're doing is we can align to our perfect clients. I'm
And
going
and my role in that, my responsibility in that, I think, is full disclosure in language. Whether I'm advertising on a website or in a brochure, is to really clarify what a
to
person can expect when they work with me. I wanted to drop that in because full disclosure is really important. Communication is very important.
No, that is to a great point because we can know who we are, but how is anybody going to know who we are? So absolutely, it has to come full circle. So I talk about this in a foundation course that I offer, but our business needs to be looked at holistically as well. It's no longer about how we're feeding ourselves nutritionally and hydrating and et cetera, et cetera. But as a business, there's a holistic lens to how we build and structure our business so that we are aligned for the right people to find us and how we do that through clarity, through communication. So I'm going to leave it there today. As this has happened with everybody else, the hour has somehow disappeared. I have had so many aha moments just listening to you, Carollanne. I hope everybody else has as well. Tell us your socials and your website, and we will talk
Oh,
about
thank
how
you.
to work with you because I am part of that crew that is going to be furthering my education with you. I think almost with everybody on my platform, I am like, schedule this in.
Ditto. I want to work with all of you people too. So my website is Solavedi, Solavedi. My Instagram is Solavedi Organics. And I think that's it. I mean, I have a YouTube channel. It's just my name, Carollanne Crichton. I do offer a lot of mentored tutorials, private trainings, which have been very, very fulfilling, as well as occasional group classes. I prefer to do live trainings over the online ones, but there's a place for everything, and I think it's great. So I
Agreed.
think that's pretty much where you can find me.
Yes, and you are linked on our website, so holisticspa alliance.com under
Okay.
Rooted in Wellness, Rooted in Practice. And you can find Carollanne's full bio as well as social links, website, and the courses and education and the different things that you offer there as well. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. You really
Thank
made
you.
this so easy to understand and inspiring. And thank you to everybody listening.
Jaime, thank you. I really appreciate you.
Have
Have
a
a great
beautiful
day.
week. We will definitely be in touch.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.